What's up, podcast peeps? Happy post Super Bowl edition of My Fantasy Podcast. Thanks for joining us. My Fantasy Podcast coming to you from myfantasysportstalk.com. How about that Super Bowl, guys? It was super spectacular. And I personally love the outcome. I'm one of your hosts for the podcast, Brandon Reed. My other host is Dan Shaw. Dan Shaw, did it come out the way you thought it would?
Obviously not. If you, that's a dumb question, Brandon. Getting on my nerves very early. Oh man, I'm not a Patriots fan, but I respect the legacies that Tom Brady and Bill Belichick have, and I was rooting for them. My bank account was rooting for them, so obviously I'm not happy with the outcome. Dumb question. Next.
But you should have known when I picked the Patriots to flip your bets immediately.
So you screwed me, is what you're saying.
I tried to tell you. I mean, I lost the last 3 games in our pick'ems, and overall in the pick'em segment of the postseason, I don't know how bad I did, but it was horrible. So,
it was bad.
Yeah, thank you. But I intentionally picked the Patriots so the Eagles would win. I don't know why you didn't catch on to that.
Yeah, I mean, good game. Good game. I not only did my bank account get hurt, but then my pride got hurt the next day when I wrote an apology letter to Nick Foles because
make a formal apology.
Man, he deserved it, and I had to eat my words. I mean, if anybody read our pick'em piece, in the piece I said the only way Nick Foles will win a Super Bowl is when he's backing up a 46-year-old Tom Brady, I mean, foot and mouth. That's I was wrong. Nick Foles, I don't know. You can say it was Doug Peterson's system and play calling, but he performed on the field. I didn't see one bad pass the entire night.
No, he actually quarterbacked that game. But we're going to get into all that. So much to talk about with the Super Bowl 52 wrap-up is just talk about the game itself. Talk about I wanted to back up and talk about Tom Brady did win the MVP Saturday night, so he got an MVP. Sean McVay won Coach of the Year, which, probably the right decision. But after the Super Bowl, Doug Peterson probably had an argument for that as well. But talk about that. Nick Foles ends up having a hell of a game and winning the Super Bowl MVP. Just hell of a game. And something else that happened that reared its ugly head in the game, and I was about to lose it, Dan, if they did not call that a catch from Ertz. But the catch situation in the NFL reared its ugly head again twice in that game. Controversial, but hey, the NFL painted us into this corner. So we'll talk about that. Also want to talk about who's our early favorite pick for next year to win it all. Also came out yesterday, I believe, that Josh McDaniels decided, maybe Indianapolis is not the place for me. Maybe I'm pretty comfortable right here in New England, which got conversations started as to what Bill Belichick's going to do. Is he on his way out? That's why McDaniels came back. I don't know. But also know Josh McDaniels' agent said, all right, look, you screwed me here. We had a deal in place. Commission's gone, so I'm dumping you. So that happened. And then I want to finish the Super Bowl talk and football talk for this podcast with a little debate. I know which way it's going to go, but I find it an interesting debate, and I'm going to bring up some numbers for you guys. And that is, who really is the GOAT now after Tom Brady lost the Super Bowl? Is it still Tom Brady? Obvious answer, maybe. Or is it Joe Montana, who has still his arguments as well? So we'll talk about that. Got NBA news. That Cleveland Cavaliers slide just keeps on coming, finding new and embarrassing ways to lose games every single game. Now the trade deadline is rearing its ugly head and bearing down on us. And for Cleveland, they're not doing anything. So we'll see about that, and I'll talk about that. Then, of course, something I sent to you. You didn't ever really respond, Dan, but I know you've been keeping up with this. So the MLB free agency period, a lot of agents are kind of pissed off because it seems to be stalling. Is there much to that, Dan? What's going on there?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's definitely been the slowest offseason probably in history since free agency started. The way I look at it, I see it more as a non-issue. Maybe the owners aren't coughing up the money, but I mean, the way baseball's structure is, I mean, if you actually get to see how players come up through the minors, it's a pretty complicated, and honestly, it's a dumb system. When just my short take on it, MLB teams, when they bring up a player through the minors, they get 6 years basically of arbitration control. So they're under contract and have to stay with that team unless their rights are traded. So these players coming up through the minors aren't getting to the majors until 22, 23, and then they still get 6 years of control. So a lot of these free agents are, in their 30s or later, and major league owners aren't coughing up money to older free agents. Honestly, look at what the Astros did last year, a younger core, some veterans mixed in, but those were acquired more by trade. Because if you do that, the team trading the player takes on a lot of the salary. So it's a whole money thing, but Major League Baseball contracts are guaranteed. So, they're paid more than anybody else. You can say, well, they're playing 162 games. I don't know. It's tough for me to look at the players and really empathize with them when a lot of them are making huge amounts of money. Of course, you have the minor leagues where they're barely making anything, but it's hard for me to empathize with the players in this type of situation.
We'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. As Dan's got some prior commitments, so I have to duck out of the podcast a little bit earlier. But I brought another baseball guy in for us this week. Dan, Ryan Thomas of Thomas Take is about to join us, so he'll fill in some of that baseball talk with us. And I don't know if you guys heard, we'll save this for a little bit later, but I heard there was a player jumping NFL ship to play baseball now. I don't know if you saw this, Dan, but we'll talk about it. I don't want to spoil that right now. That country accent just came out a little bit. Did you hear that, Dan? I said right now.
It reminded me of Tia from The Bachelor.
Yeah, that's not me, Dan. That was more of a bug in my throat than a slip. But right now, we're going to move on and talk about something else. But mailbag questions, of course, submitted by you guys. Nick Pertins is back, and several others submitting questions this week to wrap up the Super Bowl week, post-Super Bowl week, and move on to some NBA. And also, we're going to transition this week. Since you guys neglected us last week with your foodie questions, and I had to make up my own. What we're going to do this week is transition and transform this whole conversation, and I'm calling it the Drinky question of the week, as this one is alcohol and we'll say beverage related. So we'll talk about that to end the show. But we're going to bring in Ryan Thomas of Thomas Take, and Orlando Torres is going to join us here in just a second to talk about all this. Again, this is episode 5 of season 3 in 2018 of My Fantasy Podcast that you're listening to, myfantasysportstalk.com. Last week, Dan stitched us, and now we're going to get Spoke on, Dan. I heard that. What's that, another new avenue that you're bringing to us?
Yeah, Spoke. It's, I guess, a partner or a child company. Its parent company is SiriusXM, so it's just another way for listeners to be able to gravitate towards us or find us. Spoke is more of an audio app. I looked at some of it. A lot of it is non-sports related. So we're one of the few sports podcasts available on Spoke. So, if you're a Spoke fan and you want to listen to sports, check us out on there. And I'm happy with it. And who knows what it can lead to with a parent company like SiriusXM. So it's definitely promising for the podcast in general.
We're touching uncharted waters then there with Spoke. So nice. Glad to have it. And now it's getting too complex to even keep up with our podcast numbers each and every week, Dan. I mean, there's no really way to even know how many of you guys are listening and submitting questions and, you're trying to get feedback and all the avenues you're listening to. We have no way of really keeping up with iTunes, SoundCloud. We got WBLZ. No telling how many thousands and millions of people tune in from, 2 to 4 Central Time, 3 to 5 Eastern Time every Friday.
They changed it up on us last week. We were on at 11 a.m. Friday morning. So, in early morning sports talk, we were basically, we're their top hits. So thank you, WBLZ. We appreciate your airwaves. And so check us out basically all the time. We also were on at 4 a.m. Saturday morning, too. So,
how do you know that, Dan?
I get tweeted about it. And whenever they put our show on air, a link goes to my Twitter. So follow me at FF Sports Talk, and you'll see when we are just randomly on WBLZ. It's 6 a.m. on Sunday mornings too. We hit up the weekend spots basically on the times where you're either coming off a bender or just waking up.
Yeah, yeah. So you got to get on that tweeter, and check us out. WBLZ Sports, Stitcher, and Spoken now, YouTube, Facebook. I don't know, however you watch, but thanks for watching. As you see, the guys are here. We got Ryan Thomas Take, and I saw you guys just kind of sit down. Dan and Ryan just did your own little interview, and I wasn't even aware of this. I mean, y'all talking behind my back. I didn't read the full thing, but what was going on here? Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks for having me. Can you guys hear me all right?
Perfectly.
Good. All right. So, Dan sat down with me last week. He asked me a few questions to just kind of get my show out there. I've been a recurring guest on this show, so it'll provide viewers with, hey, who's this guy? Well, he's got this. You can go here, and it was good. It was a good time, and I appreciated the time from Dan on that interview.
Okay, I just want to make sure because I haven't won a fantasy title in so long. I'm just trying to figure out if Dan's trying to replace me on the podcast here. I'm trying to tell him Trae Young ain't no good. I'm trying to tell him the Ball family is over besides Lonzo, and I think he's just getting pissed and trying to trade me. So, did he ask you questions about the Ball family or Trae Young?
Thankfully, he did not. He did not ask. He did not.
Okay.
We kept it mostly about Take. Brandon, you never have to worry. You're two B's in my BBB, so don't worry, Brandon.
Okay. All right. I'll tell you. Plus, it's 2000. We've already started 2018. My contract runs through at least the end of 2018. So you're stuck with me for at least another 30 something episodes. That's for sure. So, all right. Just wanted to clear that up. Our other man from St. Ann is here, Orlando Torres. What's going on, man?
Hey, how's it going, fellas? Just down here hanging out. How about you?
You got a new beautiful backdrop this week. I love it. You got the brick wall back there.
I'm actually at a friend's right now. So I'm at a different place just for this week. So, as soon as I turned it on, I was like, man, someone's going to notice the backdrop. So, yeah.
It's beautiful. You got like antique vases back there and all kinds of things. See, that's the commitment to the podcast I'm talking about right there. No matter where he's at, no matter what's happening, he's going to turn on his phone, laptop, iPad, whatever, to connect with you guys on My Fantasy Podcast. That's dedication. That's what I love. Thanks, Orlando.
Hey, no problem. Always got to be here with you fellas.
You're the other B in the BBB.
I'm the last
brand. B. Yeah, you're the brand. You're just the brand.
There is a new B coming, though. LeVar Ball is going to be your grandpa. Let's just give a shout out to the BBB. There we go.
You told me about that, Dan, and I still haven't seen it. So which of the kids is having a baby?
Your boy Lonzo.
Is that why he hadn't been playing ball? Let's see.
His model girlfriend.
Been messing around with them girls and not playing basketball while you're sitting on my fantasy squad. Yeah, we need to have some priorities, Lonzo.
Losing to last year's champ. Don't worry. A lot of people go through it. Orlando went through it multiple times already.
Oh, God. Here we go, Brandon. Here we go.
Yeah, I don't know if Dan noticed this, but I didn't even set my lineup Monday. I was busy, preoccupied, and it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. I'm taking the L this week because I'm not healthy. I'm not going to beat you. I'm not healthy, so it doesn't matter.
Take some Tamiflu.
I actually feel fine despite the freezing rain here again in Arkansas, but my team is not. My team is not good at all. But we'll talk NBA a little bit later. But guys, okay. Super Bowl wrap up. Apparently, and this kind of struck me at some point Sunday night, is that I feel like the Dallas Cowboys were in the Super Bowl and lost it because no Cowboys fan is ever going to root for another NFC East opponent. And so you guys were not rooting for the Philadelphia Eagles at all. And I felt your pain. I was trying to holler at Orlando. Orlando just started ignoring me. Or I think Orlando, I don't know what happened to Orlando, but at some point Sunday night, he just cut off all communication and drowned his sorrows.
Yeah, no, I cut off communication. I'm not going to lie. I lost $200. I had like 3 bets. I had a beer bet, 4 bets in total. I had so much stock into the Patriots, basically guaranteeing myself the Eagles were going to win. So after that, the drinks just started kicking in, and I just turned off my cell phone, logged off of Twitter. I was done until Tuesday. I didn't even go to work Monday. I didn't make an appearance.
I skipped work. He didn't. He skipped work. The bets were so bad. Oh my God.
I told you. I was trying to poke at him, but he wasn't biting back.
Yeah. I mean, but now it's not so bad. At the end of the day, I mean, the Eagles are good. They're a good franchise. They're a good organization. Seeing guys like Travis Kelce and those guys get very emotional and hit them hard. And Nick Foles, I know he's a backup, but him, prove it wrong and everything. It's a great story. It's one of those true underdog stories. And at the same time, they came in as an underdog, but it kind of feels like the Eagles wanted you to make them believe they were the underdog because they just had that on their shoulder the whole time.
And that's the way I feel about it. And I'm not a Patriots hater, guys. I've seen this before. And to me, the Philadelphia Eagles winning was so much more of a better story, in my opinion, with a backup quarter. Well, first of all, a backup quarterback as head coach in his second year, taking a backup quarterback after losing probably his MVP quarterback during the season to the Super Bowl and winning Philadelphia, who has probably the most rabid fan base, as you saw in the celebration with about 14 million people in the streets, their first Super Bowl title. So to me, that's a much better story than the Patriots winning again. That's just me. But I thought it was a great game. I mean, it was a great game, but regardless, you have to admit that, regardless of who you're rooting for. It was back-to-back. I think there was one punt in the game. And it was amazing from start to finish, in my opinion. So, Ryan, let me ask you, because I know you're not a big Cowboys fan, and you don't really have any rooting interest in the NFC East, so there's no bias against the Eagles there. Officially, who were you rooting for, and were you happy with the outcome?
I was rooting for Philly. I mean, the Patriots are in the Bills division, and we've seen the Patriots win enough. I thought.
So you got the opposite effect. You're the opposite of those guys. You got the bias against the Patriots.
I've seen them win enough, and anytime you're watching a matchup where one team hasn't won a Super Bowl yet, and the other team has won multiple Super Bowls, in the last, 5 Super Bowls, in this, century. I wanted to see the Eagles win, and I thought that the story was just so awesome. You mentioned backup quarterback head coach wins a Super Bowl with a backup quarterback. I also have a backup quarterback offensive coordinator who might be shipping out of town a little bit. And we'll probably get to that a little bit later, but just a really cool story. The Eagles fans are probably one of the most loyal fan bases in the league. I spent some time in Philly in June. I went there for a road trip, and they are not as volatile as they're made out to be. They're pretty nice people. Maybe I just ran into the right group, but
I thought the celebration was different.
What's that?
Their streets beg to differ.
But I thought that was fairly tame, guys. I really thought that was fairly tame because they already had a reputation. And I saw maybe a few cars on fire. A few stores may have got looted. Just a nice food fight breaking out. That was tame. You see how many people are in those streets? All hell could have broken loose. It could have been like a 7.2 earthquake on the Richter scale with all those people. But it was just a few cars on fire. No big deal.
The few Uber drivers that I had, I was rocking a Buffalo Bills T-shirt, and we kind of were able to sympathize with each other. The fact that both of our teams have never won a Super Bowl. I leave the cab and say, hey, I think the guy's name was John or whatever. I was like, thanks, John. I tipped him and said, hopefully one of our franchises wins the Super Bowl soon. Good luck this season. And then sure enough, the Eagles win the Super Bowl. Pretty cool story.
Well, there was also a story, and I think that was this year. It seems like I've heard this before, but it's been somewhat recently where there was a longtime Eagles fan who recently died. I think he was in his 90s, but he wanted some of the Eagles players to be his pallbearers so they could let him down one more time. Now, I don't know if that was immediately before. I don't know if that was immediately before this season, but man, just missed it.
There's probably so many fans that just missed it. There's a lot of Bills fans that missed out on them making the playoffs. A lot of Cubs fans missed out on seeing them win a World Series. It's cool though because Philly winning it the way they won it, they were the legitimate best team of the season. They won it fair and square. GOAT status or great head coaches or great position coaches. None of that matters on Super Bowl Sunday. If one team has more points than the other, that's all that matters in the end.
I tried to tell Dan that I just didn't feel like the Patriots were the best team all year.
I would agree with that. I mean, their defense was bend but don't break, and then in the moments where it mattered, they broke. And I think that the Philadelphia's playoff run was highly underrated. I mean, just watching each game they played Atlanta, really, really tough. They held them in the goal. They had like a couple goal line stands, I believe.
They were the underdog in every single game they played.
Every single game, yeah. So good for them. I mean, I have no problem with it. I'm happy. Didn't make any bets though.
So Dan, how brilliant do I look of bringing that piece out about the odds this year? Because it just seemed like that it was a year of upsets. It seemed like it was the year of the underdog, and who proved that more in the season finale than the Philadelphia Eagles, who were the underdog every single game and won straight through.
Yeah, good call by the new breed. I mean, you brought out numbers that I didn't even know existed. It all came back to underdogs and the parity of the NFL this year, and I think the Eagles taking home the championship kind of speaks for that. I've never really seen. I mean, you can look at the Giants and Jeff Hostetler back in the day, but I've never really remembered, a backup quarterback make this type of postseason run en route to a Super Bowl title. So it speaks to the parity. I think. I don't think the Eagles are world champs. You can call them the best team, but I wouldn't say, that's a top 10 to 15 team ever in football when you look at Super Bowl winners.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So
I don't, even if the Patriots would have won, I don't even think that was near the best Patriots team that they had.
Yeah. I mean, definitely not. I would take the team that went undefeated in the regular season and lost to the Giants in the Super Bowl over this year's Patriots team. It speaks to the parity, and that's what's exciting because I see all these NFL fans when their team doesn't make the playoffs thinking it's going to be years for that turnaround, and not every team is the Buffalo Bills. You can actually win the next season. You don't have to wait 17 years to make the playoffs. So you can see those non-playoff teams; they always have a chance the next season.
The Bills got all theirs in a row. There'd be teams, franchises that die for a chance to make a Super Bowl. The Bills went to 4 in a row. You just didn't get it.
They're the spurt franchise of the NFL, for better or for worse.
I mean, that you squeezed about 20, 25 years worth of Super Bowls into 4 straight years. Most franchises don't get there that often. Even the Patriots, it was kind of rare for them to even get there back-to-back. And once again, they didn't win back-to-back. It's just not what they do for whatever reason. But so I want to back up real quickly, guys. Brady won the NFL MVP Saturday night, and now the streak lasts 18 years now. I guess the last NFL MVP to win the Super Bowl MVP was Kurt Warner in the 2000 Super Bowl, 1999 season. So that streak lasts, and the streak actually moves on to 0-9 now of NFL MVPs in the Super Bowl. 0-9 since 2000. But here's in that piece that I was just alluding to with Dan, where I broke down kind of the odds in the season of the underdog. And I made a point that, was it really the season of the underdog? Because the underdog won almost damn near 1 out of every 3 games in the entire NFL season. And of course, we saw what the Philadelphia Eagles did in the postseason. But my other point was maybe it's just mediocre football, and we just hit on that. The Patriots really weren't the best Patriots team we've seen. They were good because they got Belichick and Tom Brady, but they weren't just surrounded by enormous talent. Philadelphia just kind of limped their way. I mean, they had a great team, great defense, but they survived with a backup quarterback, and their weapons really weren't great on the outside, for either Wentz or Foles. But so here's the numbers, guys, and one of them really sticks out to me. Okay, so Brady was the passing leader this year with 4,577 yards. That was the lowest NFL leader in 11 years. The receiving leader, Antonio Brown, had 1,533 yards. That's the second lowest in the last 7 years. So that's pretty close. But here's the kicker to me. Dan Schalk's own Kareem Hunt led the NFL this year in rushing with 1,327 yards. That was the lowest leader in the NFL since 1999. That just kind of goes to show you that, to me, personally, I think the season was kind of mediocre as far as football play all around. And I think that may contribute to some of the ratings dips and just the way you feel about football and why you see almost one out of every 3 games going to the underdog. Orlando, let's hear from you. What do you think about it overall? Do you think it was a mediocre season as far as play goes? There was no dominant team.
Yeah, there wasn't really no dominant team, but I kind of liked it because you didn't know what to expect. You think about teams like the Vikings, the Saints, the way they started out 0-2, and they just made that run. You think about how the Packers were probably going to reign supreme, and then Aaron Rodgers goes down. You look at guys like Odell, and I know that's going back to injuries, but it's just the just a lopsidedness of the way the league started out. But overall, there was a lot of like political stuff going on, which probably was a dip in the ratings and the way the season turned out to be. But overall, looking back at it, it was still pretty great a year of football because you just didn't know what you were going to get. Just like what you mentioned too with the numbers and the bets and the underdogs, every season, every week, you just didn't know exactly what you're going to get. The Jaguars too are a perfect example of that.
Dan, what did you think about that? I don't know if you saw that number that I brought out, but with the rushing leader for sure, though. Did you realize that, Dan? Did it seem like that in this season that Kareem Hunt led the league with 1,300 yards, and that was the lowest number to lead the NFL since 1990? Ryan wasn't even born.
Yeah, I mean that number is kind of shocking. I think some of it might have to do with the running back by committee approach. I mean, you see backup running backs or these second tier guys get just as much a run in some organizations as the starter would. So I think that might play a factor. Maybe some of it has to do with teams passing a little bit more, maybe not staying dedicated to the run. I mean, even look at Kareem Hunt. He went games where he was given single-digit carries, and he still ended up with that number. So I think it definitely is a testament to the NFL kind of being down. But there's definitely some other factors into play, and that definitely affects it. It also affects your fantasy team. I mean, we see that with drafting every year. You want a guy that's going to get a workload, and there's only so many at the top that actually receive that heavy workload.
And it wasn't really the trend back then. And that leader, by the way, in 1990 was Barry Sanders. But that it wasn't the trend back then to have a two running back system now. And it is for the most case. Really, you need at least two good backs. And man, we saw that with the Eagles too, with LeGarrette Blount and Jay Ajayi both having really good games in this Super Bowl. But how about Chris Long? Too. Huh?
Corey Clement too.
Yeah,
Corey Clement was fantastic. Yeah.
But how about Chris Long and LeGarrette Blount winning back-to-back Super Bowls to two different teams? That was pretty odd and crazy. But so Tom Brady does win the NFL MVP, deservingly so. Did anybody else have an argument, guys? Ryan, was there anybody else that really? I mean, the way I put it, it was kind of a smash against Tom Brady, but he fell into this award because they made the Super Bowl again. It's Tom Brady. Yeah, he led the league in passing, but there just wasn't any other viable options.
I think that's a part of why the ratings have dipped. I think part of it is some of the political anthem stuff. Another part of it is the fact that the same teams have been winning for the last, 15, 20 years. Not even just the Patriots. You go back to, the fact that Brady, Roethlisberger, Peyton Manning, Breeze, it's almost the same quarterbacks in the Super Bowl practically. 13 out of the last 15. There was some stat out there, 13 of the last 15 years. And the fact that the Eagles were actually able to win this one, I think will bring some of that viewership back. And the fact that, hey, in this season, the underdog won. And they didn't just win. They went 13-3. They went through the Falcons, the Vikings, and then the Patriots. And I would say, I mean, compared to the other candidates for the MVP, I don't see how you could create an argument that Tom Brady shouldn't have won the MVP. I think it was, as you said, the award fell right into his lap.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's the way I see it. Because it was just, you had Antonio Brown. I don't know, maybe. I honestly think Carson Wentz, if he didn't get hurt, he probably would have won the MVP.
Maybe Todd Gurley, maybe. But outside of that, I mean, I don't really see
it. But, I mean, he didn't even lead the league in rushing. I kind of agree with you. Yeah. I think he was more of the impact player just based on what the Rams were able to do in the turnaround. But they got theirs when Sean. Yeah, I think so. From week to week, without Todd Gurley, Jared Goff ain't having such a great year. Let's face it. But anyway, the Rams did get theirs when Sean McVay won the Coach of the Year. Hey, deservingly so. Can't argue that at all. If there's any other argument there, especially after Sunday night, it's Doug Peterson. So the right choice was made there too, Dan?
Yeah, I like McVay. I mean, basically, he was the offense. You can look at Jared Goff, but just that improvement that he made, and then there are the reports that I believe to be true that came out that he was calling the plays in Jared Goff's ear basically as soon as the play ended, so he could get up. Goff can get up to the line, and McVay was actually telling him audibles to make. And hot reads to make, before he actually snapped the ball.
Hey, and that makes perfect sense because my criticism of Jared Goff this whole time, Dan, was that he didn't look like he had the mental capacity to grasp the playbook to me. And I think Ryan watches Hard Knocks, right? Did you watch it last year when it was with the Rams? Did it not look that way to you? It didn't look like he was just looking at the playbook in the meetings like, duh, and some quarterbacks are not going to get it, and that's half the battle, more than half the battle.
When you have a guy like Jared Goff that was so dominant in college, and then he's got all that pressure of being the first overall pick, and there's not a lot of talent around him, and we can talk about coaches being good. We can talk about coaches. Talk about going from one extreme to the next with Jeff Fisher to Sean McVay. It's just – I think that what Sean McVay did for the Rams, I would say was fantastic, but Doug Peterson should have got the award, in my opinion, just based on the fact, not even the fact that they won the Super Bowl, but out of the gate, the Eagles were dominating. And the Rams were too, but I just thought that Carson Wentz probably would have won the MVP had he stayed healthy. If Carson Wentz won the MVP, if he would have stayed healthy, maybe Peterson would have got the Coach of the Year.
But he got the last laugh and got the
title.
the
last laugh. He got the ring, and that's all that matters.
So Dan, what did you say?
I said I thought McVay deserved it. I like that. I mean, to me, the Eagles are just a more talented team than the Rams. I mean, you can see how bad the Rams were last season, and just the turnaround that they made. I mean, the Eagles weren't a playoff team, but they had the pieces in place, and they added even more talent in the offseason, where the Rams, their team stayed very, very much the same. I mean, they added a couple wideouts. But other than that, I mean, they didn't add a lot of pieces up front along the offensive or defensive lines. So it was the same type of team, and just what they were able to do with McVay, to me, was the most impressive coaching feat of the season.
Yeah, almost exactly the same personnel. And let's not forget, through most of the NFL season, and they probably ended this way, number one or highest scoring team in the NFL. Where the hell did that come from? And last year they were really fumbling and stumbling to even score points. So, but Peterson did get the last laugh. Let me just get you guys' opinion before we kind of move on here and talk about the next thing I want to talk about. How great of a Super Bowl was this? We've kind of talked about the ratings. The ratings actually did dip. I think we're off about 8 million viewers from just last year's Super Bowl. But a couple of key points here is to me, in the way there's a trend here, okay? If you want to draw the political thing and the kneeling for the anthem, I know people who are not watching football because of that. I don't agree with that, because you're basically letting less than 2% of the league, the actions of 2% of the league dictate whether you watch a business or participate in a business or not. Hey, there's a lot of other folks doing a lot of good in the NFL. So, even if you disagree with less than 2% of the league, there's a lot of other folks that are doing a lot of good things. But hey, everyone has their own prerogative to do what they want. Another big thing that to look forward in the future here is not all of these are going to be live numbers, because me personally, I stream the game through NBC's website. So you got streaming applications that are not going to really apply to the hardcore Nielsen ratings. But let me also tell you this, folks. As far as the ratings go, it was the 10th most highest viewed program ever. So even though it was down by 8 million views from last year's Super Bowl, it's still the 10th highest rated program ever in history of television. So it's still doing okay. But the game itself, I think if you didn't watch the game itself and you're remotely interested in football at all, you missed a hell of a game. The game itself. Dan, super spectacular game.
Yeah. I definitely was entertained throughout. I mean, I'm a defensive guy myself, so I like to see some defense being played. But
you're the one that predicted the high-scoring game. You predicted.
I predicted the Patriots to score a lot of points, not the Eagles. It was 42-17 was my prediction. So I was expecting points on one side, but not the other. And just the way Nick Foles was able to to shred. I mean, absolutely shred that Patriots defense was just mind-boggling every single time. You would think they would put a stop up. I mean, even the running lanes for the backs. I mean, LeGarrette Blount isn't a fast guy, but he seemed to be outrunning a lot of Patriots defenders. So yeah, it was definitely entertaining. I like to see a little bit more defense, but I think for the average football fan, you like to see the points being scored. So, I definitely stayed entertained throughout.
Hell of a game. Dan just mentioned the defense. I don't want you guys to get sidetracked too much on that because I think there was a key part of that, and his name is Malcolm Butler. But we got a question specifically about that a little bit later, so we'll address that a little bit later. Also, we're going to talk more about the future of Nick Foles a little bit later with the mailbag questions that you guys submitted. But Orlando, just as a game, as a football game from start to finish, like I said, I think maybe one punt in the entire game. Hell of a game.
Yeah, no, definitely hell of a game. And I was actually having this this conversation with a friend earlier. Speaking of like when I was growing up, I don't remember all the Super Bowls clearly growing up. When I started watching the Cowboys, I started paying attention to football a lot. But you never got games as good as we've been having the past couple of years. Looking at the Cowboys back then, a bunch of the games are blowouts. Or, some of the other teams at that time, even the 49ers. You think about, the Giants and Patriots games, the Patriots-Seahawks games, the last year's Super Bowl with the Falcons and Patriots, Broncos and Panthers. There's been some great games, and this past Sunday was just another great game. So overall, I've been spoiled by it because every year, going to the Super Bowl, that's kind of one thing, and I'm pretty sure the NFL worries about too. They're going to put up the product is going to be good as the way they build it up to be. And this past Sunday, it was a pretty hell of a product. It was a good game.
Yeah, regardless of who you're rooting for. If you really weren't rooting for anybody, just a hell of a game from start to finish. So, Dan, I just got a notification. Lonzo Ball, no, you can't read that, but Lonzo Ball expected to test the knee out tonight.
Oh, well, now he's about to be a daddy, so he's got to make that money and and get it going on the court. So, yeah. Or maybe he just doesn't want to stay by his pregnant girlfriend, hormones, other things. Makes sense.
Yep. The comeback is on. Sorry it had to be on you. He's going to drop 67 on you tonight.
Damn Instagram models.
I didn't know he was dating a model. I guess I would know that if I watched Ball in the Family, right?
You're not getting my tags?
No, I'm getting them.
Oh.
You're close to getting blocked on Facebook. I sent you a tag today. Did you get my tag then of a real high school game?
Yeah,
high school ballers.
I didn't
Mac
get it.
McClung. Watch out, Mac McClung.
I'm watching professionals play basketball, not high schoolers.
Professional. Okay. In Lithuania. Church League. Ryan, the Super Bowl, the game itself from start to finish, hell of a game, right?
Top 3 Super Bowl ever, in my opinion. I'm going to put, if I were to do a top 3 ranking just off the top of my head, the Giants versus the Patriots when they ended their undefeated season. I don't think there will ever be one that'll top that, just because the Patriots were so heavily favored, David Tyree, all that stuff. One Super Bowl that I always remember is the Rams versus the Titans.
Yeah.
That was when I really started watching football, and you alluded to the fact that I wasn't born in 1990 earlier, so I was around 7 or 8 when that Super Bowl took place. But that's when I really started to watch football as avid as I do now. 1 yard was all Tennessee needed to tie the game.
Well, I know you remember that season too. Remember who the Titans beat?
It was the Music City Miracle year. Yeah, it was the yard that they took from the Bills. That's what happened. Karma. But no, I think really that was one of the best. I mean, the story was crazy. Nick Foles finally said to everybody, "Hey, haters gonna hate. I'm gonna play, no pressure," and just played his game. I mean, it was awesome. I loved it.
And the thing is, he was actually quarterbacking the team. I mean, he was slipping in and out of coverage. I mean, the one time where he sidestepped the pressure from the 2 guys coming and stepped up in the pocket, made the throw. I mean,
that was on 3rd and 8 too. That was on a 3rd and 8 play. If it's the play that he almost got sacked. There was like an arm over his shoulder, and
he
he
stepped up in between 2 guys. And the pass to
He's a good
Clement
quarterback.
was a freaking laser on a line. That
Mhm.
pass into the back of the end zone, wow.
The no catch. Oh yeah.
We're going
I
to talk
thought-
about that real
I
quick.
thought the pass to Alshon Jeffrey, the one that was the Jeffrey touchdown, I burst out laughing when that play happened because it was just so ridiculous. Like what I was seeing is just like, oh my God, is this really happening? It was great. It was awesome.
So let's move on and talk about that because that's next on my list to talk about because the stupid NFL catch rule reared its ugly head twice in this game. Dan mentioned the Alshon Jeffrey. I don't know what you guys are seeing. I'm so sick of people evaluating this whole thing through 3 or 4 seconds, like after he's out of the end zone. I don't care at that point. He caught the ball. The first foot was inbounds when he caught the ball. Then the second foot went in, and then people were looking at the third step of his that was out of bounds. Well, guess what, folks? That was the third step, okay? He had already caught the ball. After that, I don't care what happens. That was the catch. And the Ertz catch, that was just a catch. He took 3 lunging steps and dove in the end zone. Once he crosses that plane, and just like the referee said, he became a runner at that point. Well, duh. So once he dove and crossed that plane, it's over. It's over. And they owe the Pittsburgh Steelers an apology, as our man DDT said Super Bowl Sunday night. But I have every confidence that this stupid catch rule is going to be rectified in the offseason, and it's the continuation of the catch part that they're about to drop and fix this so this stuff doesn't keep happening. And I think even more so after the Super Bowl because like you saw, it happened twice in the Super Bowl. Had they not called that Ertz catch a catch, oh my God, I was going to lose it, and I'm sure Philadelphia would have really burnt to the ground after that. So, I don't know. You still think Alshon Jeffries was not a catch, Dan?
No, the Corey Clement one.
No.
Yeah, that was the Clement one that he was talking about. Yeah,
Yeah, Corey Clement. Yeah, no, that was not a catch. It just wasn't. I mean, he did. So he had the ball. His left foot went down. You could say his right foot went down, but there is an angle that I saw today that shows the ball basically in the air. It's not touching any of his hands. So the possession was lost.
How many hands does he got?
He's got multiple. And
I thought it was more so.
None of them had the ball. So the possession was not maintained, and then that third foot came out of bounds. So technically, I believe that should have been a no catch. But the Ertz one, hands down, yeah, I do believe that was a catch. But the Corey Clement one, I don't think it was.
That's the point. The NFL has clouded our judgment, clouded our vision so bad to the point where if you watch that real time, then it was a catch. To me, I think. So that's
what was the worst part of that whole thing? The worst part of the whole thing, and I don't think anybody has really talked about this enough or at all, but I almost popped a vein during the game while I was watching it. The fact that even the announcers had to say to themselves, we can't even guess if this is a catch or not because we've seen so many sway one way, we've seen so many sway another way.
Well, they were convinced the Ertz catch was not a catch. They were both saying that Ertz catch was not a catch. And I'm like,
I would like to
crazy.
think that
I thought that
Ertz
catch wasn't a
the
catch
issue will be
either.
fixed, but
You
I
thought
just
the
don't
Ertz
see it
catch
being
wasn't
fixed.
a catch, Orlando?
Yeah, and when I saw it, because I've seen catches like that, kind of reminded me of the Calvin Johnson thing. You put the ball on the floor, it bounces up, he catches it, but it's a catch. We've seen that go the other way.
But Ertz was in full run mode. He had took 3 lunging steps. He was clearly running with the ball in his hands and dove.
I mean, we've seen calls where I got that, but we've seen calls where someone loses the ball at the goal line or something, and it gets overturned or something. The Corey Clement one I saw where it flows out of bounds, whatever, it was a catch. Yeah, looking at it, it was a catch, but in real time, I was with the announcers. I kept telling with the party I was at, I was like, that wasn't a catch. And the fact that they took so long to look at it to see what was catch, I thought I was right too. But it just goes back to what you said, just with all these, what's a catch, what isn't a catch. It kind of just clouds your mind of you don't know what to expect from these calls sometimes.
Okay, so here's another point of view, guys, that I watch it and it's not going to go for it. That my point is not going to be argued in today's game. But you remember back in the day, there was such thing as called trapping the ball. When you catch it, you cannot trap it with the ground to catch the ball. Okay. So my thing is now with this particular Ertz play, I don't care that the ball even hit the ground. His hands never came off the ball. I don't care that it hit the ground. He actually popped up in the air and he still caught it back and maintained possession of it. At that point, when he dove in the end zone and the ball hit the ground, even though it was in his hands, I don't care that it hit the ground because it was still in his hands. He never dropped the ball. And then when he did roll over, it popped up and he rolled over. He still caught it. So he never, ever lost the ball. I don't care that it hit the ground. So what? We're making this game too damn hard. But I mean, if you're talking about the act of catching it and trapping the ball, yes, let's go back to the trap rule. But after he took 3 lunging steps and dove in the end zone, the ball hits the ground and it's still in his hands and rolls over. And I don't know. Here's an interesting point. I bet if that would have been intercepted after it pops up, it would have been an interception. They wouldn't have been looking at trying to say, oh, it wasn't a catch. It would have been an interception, and it would have for sure went the other way. So why isn't it clearly a catch then? So that's the thing. I don't care that these balls are hitting the ground a little bit, maybe moving in the player's hands once they hit the ground after they've caught the ball. I don't care. That's stupid. What are we talking about? The game is hard enough. So does that make sense to any of you other guys? I mean,
well, at the end of the day, it doesn't even matter because it was already ruled a catch. The Eagles won. So
yeah, but we gotta move forward. Maybe your Cowboys do have a Super Bowl if they knew what the hell a catch was.
Yep, Tony Romo.
I wanted to chime in on that too. That was my next point. I found a clip of both the Dez Bryant play from I believe it was the divisional round of the playoffs that year versus the Packers, where Dez Bryant, it looked like to me, he caught the ball. It was a side-by-side, frame-by-frame, Dez Bryant and Zach Ertz, and the plays were very similar. Not the exact same, obviously, but they were very similar. And if Zach Ertz was a catch, Dez's was a catch. That's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so.
Okay, so I think we got to get Dan out of here. Your time is running short, right, Dan?
I have 10 more minutes for you guys. You are lucky. We are getting delayed a little bit, so you're good. I got 10 minutes for you, Brandon.
Okay.
All right.
So I'll tell you what I want to do. What I want to do next is get Dan's take on these drafts. We got a draft question, and he's our draft expert. He's our draft guru, and maybe he can even break down a player profile for us. So let's do that before we say goodbye to Dan Shaw. You are listening to My Fantasy Podcast from myfantasysportstalk.com. Appreciate it. Appreciate you for joining us and all the avenues. I can't even list them all. We ain't got time. Dan's only got 10 minutes, so I don't have time to list all the avenues that you can watch and listen to My Fantasy Podcast. So I'll just tell you that I'm Brandon Reed, Dan Schalk is here, Ryan Thomas is here, and Orlando Torres is here. So real quick, Dan, you came out with your Anthony Miller draft profile this week, and you were comparing him to the greatest in the game right now, Antonio Brown, AB himself. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Do you want to talk about him, or did you have anybody else that you want to talk about and highlight as your draft prospect profile player of the week this week?
No, we'll go with Anthony Miller. I really enjoyed watching his tape. So when I watch tape, I take some notes. If you read my profiles, I bring out strengths, weaknesses, different things. And with Anthony Miller, I just kept adding these strengths. I mean, out of all the receivers, he's my number 2 ranked receiver. Number 1 is Calvin Ridley. But in terms of strengths that I can see while watching his tape, he actually has more than Calvin Ridley. I mean, Calvin Ridley is a little bit better at some of the things that he does that makes him my number 1 receiver. But just Anthony Miller, he's so versatile. I mean, he'll play outside, he'll play in the slot, similar to an Antonio Brown. He's not very tall. He's not, the strongest guy out there, but he's very competitive. I kept reading quotes, from teammates and coaches on how hard of a worker he is. He plays with a chip on his shoulder, being a former walk-on. And he just has the skills. He just finds these openings in zone coverage. He can beat man coverage. And he's a great ball tracker, which you don't really see for somebody at his height on how good of not necessarily leaping ability, but just being able to pluck the ball out with defenders on him. The biggest knocks that I've seen on him is basically medical history. He did injure his foot in the Liberty Bowl. He wasn't able to play in the Senior Bowl, and a lot of scouts are questioning his long-term durability and health. So if he can pass medical tests, at the combine and pro days and different things like that, I think you can see him as a first-round pick. Probably a day 2 selection, if there's some iffy medicals, but I think he is a fantastic player that you're really not going to find in every single draft. Some of the body adjustments that I saw him make were just fantastic. And Brandon, I'm sure you can kind of attest to that, just how how good of a receiver that he really is at Memphis. A lot of people aren't going to be able to see him play, a lot. But I mean, he put up unbelievable numbers. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with that system, but just overall, his play as a receiver just stands out on film. And if you look at Antonio Brown's college tape to Anthony Miller's, it's very, very similar. And I think if he's given a chance and in an offensive system like Pittsburgh's, he has a chance to duplicate or put up Antonio Brown type numbers. And that's a lot to say, but I'm confident in saying that.
Well, and he's going to have the benefit is if he does go somewhere in the second round or their chance, not being in the lottery selection or top 15, top 20 pick anyway, affords them the opportunity to actually play with a good quarterback and play on a good team and maybe get some shine right away. But you're right, and I don't know how else to break it down, but dude is just a playmaker. Maybe cliche, but dude is just a playmaker. And one of the points I brought up to you, Dan, is that, and I heard several people talk about this throughout the season, that he's one of the best blocking wide receivers. And you don't really typically think about that when you're talking about the wide receiver skill set, especially when talking about draft prospects, is their blocking ability. But dude is just he just is all over the field, and he's a relentless player. If he needs to block on a particular play, he's going to block because it's whatever for the team's success on that particular play. Maybe that has something to do with a little bit of his injury history, because dude plays all out, 110% on every single play, and is just relentless. So there's a spot for him in the NFL because dude is just a playmaker. How tall is Antonio Brown?
I think they were either 5'10" or 5'11". And Anthony Miller is listed at 5'11". Who knows if he's actually that tall? But their heights and weights are almost identical.
Yep. So very similar there in stature, so if anybody kind of wanted to use that as a knock against him, but dude is just a playmaker. That's all I know how to tell you, but read that on the website right now, myfantasysportstalk.com, along with all the other draft profiles brought out this week. Dan, how many you bring out this week? About another 15 or so? Yeah,
we're getting up there. I got close to a lot of who I believe is going to be in the first round, or that type of conversation is out there. Some other prospects like a Sonny Michel that I brought out today. Michael Gallup, sleeper wide receiver prospect out of Colorado State, I came out with today, and Calvin Ridley, our number 1 overall wide receiver in the class. So every day we're just busting them out.
So let's talk. We'll field our first mailbag question before Dan gets out of here, because this one is strictly draft related, and it starts right at the top. It's from Eric Lemons. What will the Browns do with the number 1 and number 4 draft picks? Best player available, or take a quarterback, or Saquon Barkley? This one comes from Eric Lemons. So Dan, start it off right there. They're afforded the luxury of the number 1 and 4 pick. And what I glanced through several mocks today, and pretty much everyone I saw through 3 or 4 of the more reputable ones I saw had them taking Saquon Barkley at number 1, I guess because of fear that maybe the Giants would take him at number 2, and then they were taking a quarterback at number 4.
Yeah, I think a lot for the Browns has to do with what they're going to do in free agency. If say they go after a Kirk Cousins, obviously I wouldn't recommend drafting a quarterback at 1 or 4. Really, I wouldn't recommend drafting any quarterback in this class, maybe a Josh Allen. But other than that, I don't think any of the quarterbacks are worthy of even a top 10 selection in this type of draft. I don't think there's a lot of special players at the quarterback position this year. So I do agree with the Barkley pick, if you're confident in him. And then I wouldn't mind them going after, whether it be a Bradley Chubb or Vita Vea to kind of clear up that defensive front. You got Myles Garrett last year, Danny Shelton. So there are some solid players, and you can make that defensive line, stud level, kind of like the Eagles who just won the championship this year. Another option is Minkah Fitzpatrick, who's, safety DB. He can kind of play both ways. He's kind of a stud that kind of can replace that Joe Hayden role.
And he's been like top 5, 6, or 7 in pretty much every mock I've seen. Definitely a top 10 player.
Yeah. I haven't gotten through all his tape yet. I actually started with Derwin James first. But yeah, Minkah Fitzpatrick, everything I've seen so far, he's going to go in the top 5. So you can shore up that secondary with a pick like that. So I'm not sold on a quarterback for the Browns if they get one in free agency. But if they don't, yeah, you're probably going to see him reach. I hope it's – I hope it's a Josh Allen so he can kind of turn that franchise around. I'm confident in him. But if it's a Josh Rosen or anything like that, I'm not a fan of Rosen personally. So his attitude and can kind of destroy that locker room. So I'd be a little bit wary of that type of pick. But if you can get an impact player like Barkley first, and then an impact defensive player, a Chubb, Vea, or Fitzpatrick at 4, I think you're doing well for yourself and the Browns organization.
There you go, Eric Lemons, straight from the Dan Shaw. We call him Champ. Okay, so 2 more things. You'll have to apologize to the lovely Marissa Caruso on my behalf because I got 2 more questions for you, Dan. Early favorite for next year, and who is the GOAT, really? Is it Tom Brady or Joe Montana?
Cowboys. And you like that? I know you're right.
Just stupid questions by me, honestly, really, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if Tony Romo came back to the Cowboys, it would be the Cowboys. Honestly, it's way too open for me to even. I'll say the Patriots just because I can guarantee Tom Brady will be in the playoffs.
Philadelphia's got a strong chance, right?
You would think, as long as Carson Wentz comes back healthy. I don't think they're going to keep Nick Foles, but if they do, then yeah, I guess you could say the Eagles. But I need to see Carson Wentz healthy in order to proclaim them, back-to-back champs or perennial back-to-back champs. So yeah, I guess I'll go Patriots with the Cowboys being a close 1B option. And then the GOAT, I mentioned him a couple times before. I'm going to go Brady. People look at those Super Bowl records, Brady losing 3 times. Joe Montana was 4-3 in NFC Championship games. And I was just actually, for fun, I put on the Giants 49ers. I think it was 84. I heard about it from the 2 Bills 30 for 30 that came out. And so I actually went out and I found that film of that game. And Joe Montana was absolutely garbage in that New York Giants NFC Championship game or divisional. I don't even know which one it was, but he was terrible.
And you typically don't see bad games like that.
If I'm not mistaken.
Honestly, you don't. You just don't see bad games from Brady.
No, yeah. So I'm going Brady. He has more championships. Leave the Super Bowl record out of it because Montana could have made so many more Super Bowls and may have lost them, but he lost the game before that. So I'm going Brady, and to me, it's not close.
Well, there you go. That is Dan Shaw. He is checking out for this week, but appreciate you stopping by, Champ, and spending a little bit of time with us. And we're actually going to be off, guys, next week. So no My Fantasy Podcast next week. We're going to take some time to recharge the batteries, and it's a great way, a great time to take a little bit of a break. Ending, NFL football season. We're about to be into the All-Star break of the NBA, so we'll be off next week. So you're not going to see Dan Shaw for a while.
Cry. It's okay. Pitchers and catchers report in 6 days, people. Just remember that.
Go Red Sox.
They'll never forget it, Dan. Never forget it.
All right. Enjoy. Right. Have a good show, guys.
See you later.
Easy, Dan. Stay warm.
Wow.
So, and I'm going to back up, guys.
And then there were 3.
And we're down to 3. So I want to back up, guys, and get you guys' take. Early favorite for next year. I really think Philadelphia's got a strong chance. And of course, New England always does. As long as you're telling me Tom Brady's going to be back, Belichick's going to be back, I think they're going to build a team, so they got a chance. But I really like what Philadelphia's got going on. I think they could be even better next year now that they have everything under them. And don't forget, they acquired Jay Ajayi halfway through the season. And back when the trade was made, Dan Shaw wasn't really a favorite, but I just knew in my head, I'm like, wait till playoff time. Dude is going to make a difference. He is what they need just to beef up and just be more legitimate. And he was. They both had great games, both the running backs. And the acquisition of LeGarrette Blount really paid off big time for them. I don't see them stepping back. As long as Carson Wentz comes back healthy, to me, they got to be favorites in the NFC. If not them, I can't tell you who, because I really just don't think it's Minnesota. They're still going to have to figure out their quarterback situation. Who else is it going to be? So I really like them a lot in the AFC. I can't really think of anyone else that it may be unless Jacksonville shores up a little bit and does something. Pittsburgh will probably be there, but I think you're probably still looking about the same 5 or 6 teams. Orlando?
Yeah, in the AFC, you got to do the Patriots because they're there every year. I would say the Steelers, depending on the situation, because they're a team that has a big old rain cloud looming over them. You don't know what's going to happen with Le'Veon Bell, if he's going to be committed to starting in the 2018 season.
Roethlisberger almost retired last year.
He almost retired last year. He said he's coming back, but then you don't know. You just never know with Roethlisberger. He's just like a roller coaster with him. I do like the Jags. I'm not going to say they're going to make it that far again, but I mean the Jags, they're a pretty young team, and if Blake Bortles could help them out a little bit more on offense, I mean I'd watch out for Jacksonville. They could be a pretty scary team. For the NFC, it's pretty wide open. You got to put the Eagles because they're the champs, especially if Carson Wentz comes. I would love to see the Vikings, but Pat Schumer leaving, and you don't know how the team is going to look next season. It might be a huge step backwards. Aaron Rodgers coming back, so you got to throw Green Bay in a conversation, and you still got to throw in New Orleans in there. I think from what they did and those 2 running backs that they have, and Michael Thomas.
They might just have one more shot with Drew Brees because his time's coming to an end too.
His time is coming up, but he doesn't have to sit back there and throw the ball 40, 50 times a game now with those 2 dynamic running backs, so that helps him a lot.
The Saints are my pick, to be honest, and I was hoping you guys wouldn't mention them. That way I could kind of try and shock you guys by saying that. But the run game this year for the Saints, I think, was one of the best stories of just Kamara and Ingram. Mark Ingram's really coming to his own. The defense, they had Marshawn Lattimore. Their defense was just piece by piece put together. It seemed like they were a revelation this year in certain games. So I think I would say the Saints in the NFC, and I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that possibly the Steelers put one last run together with Big Ben, and if he stays, that's the thing. It's just
they got all the pieces. I don't understand why. I was just surprised that they gave up gave up as many points to Jacksonville in the divisional round that they did, because I thought we were going to see another New England Pittsburgh showdown. They got all the pieces.
I think Philly could be a front runner too for other reasons outside of Carson Wentz and what we know about their team. One thing that has to be taken into consideration is that I think Foles is going to get traded, and they're going to have more picks to work with. I think that's what's going to end up getting Foles onto another team is draft picks, not essentially players. Maybe it'll be like a 2 draft pick, and a player type deal. But I definitely think Foles will get traded, which will help them in terms of there's ammunition that they'll have.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in just a second. We've got a question, a mailbag question that specifically talks about Nick Foles here coming up. So Josh McDaniels, guys, and maybe this is one of the reasons why the Patriots are the favorites again, and a lot of people maybe solidify their thought in their head that the Patriots are going to be the favorites again because Josh McDaniels backed out of the Indianapolis job. What is this all about? What's going on there? I know his agent subsequently dumped him, and I'd probably be pretty too if you negotiated and bargained this deal. I mean, this deal was reported weeks ago, like 2-3 weeks ago, that he's going to become the new Indianapolis head coach. And when he got this far, ready to ink, I think he wrote half his first name on the contract and then decided to back out. I'd heard he had an interview, maybe an exit interview with New England on Tuesday, or maybe it was the hiring interview with Indianapolis. Something changed his mind Tuesday, and I'm trying to figure out what that was. Ryan, this is not the first time this happened. Dan brought out a piece, today when this has happened before. So, but
yes, yeah. The not only has it happened before, with McDaniels, but it's happened. We know about Bill Belichick. I mean, Dan alluded to it earlier. I don't know if he actually watched the 2 Bills, the 30 for 30 with Bill Belichick and Bill Parcells. What a cluster bleep that whole situation was. With Bill Belichick, stepping onto the Jets with Parcells as like an assistant head coach and all that. It was just like a huge merry-go-round. I have 3 theories as to why McDaniels stayed put. One, if you were to ask me, if I'm a rising offensive coordinator, who would I rather work for? Would I rather work for Jim Irsay or Robert Kraft? I'll stop right there on that one. You can fill in the blanks. Number 2, it's pretty easy. The shoes or the seat, I should say, that Josh McDaniels sits in, being that he's coaching a 41-year-old, soon-to-be 41-year-old quarterback that is at the top of his game, that's an MVP, that just threw for 505 yards in a losing effort in the Super Bowl for 3 touchdowns. And last but not least, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think Bill Belichick has got one foot out the door in New England, and Josh McDaniels is going to take his spot.
Well, I think that's the first thing everyone thought when that initial report came out last night, that, okay, what's going on in New England? Is Bill Belichick on his way out? Because I thought that was kind of, what everyone really thought as far as Josh McDaniels staying on as long as he has, really, the last 2 years in New England, is that they're grooming him and he's wanting to take over the dynasty, because once Tom Brady leaves, who is to say that Bill Belichick's really going to stick around? Because I don't know. I think his record's going to take a dip. I mean, those two have worked so well together. They have been blessed. Bill Belichick and Tom Brady have been so blessed to have been paired together for all these years and have such the success they did, that I'm not sure that either one of them has quite that success if they don't have each other. So the plan was for Josh McDaniels to finally take over the job. So, it's still. You feel bad for Indianapolis, because what did they do now? You're very late in the game to be filling your head coaching spot with a combine coming up like in 2 to 3 weeks.
Well, there is light at the end of the tunnel, because I've heard that Frank Reich is leaving the Eagles to go to the Colts. I've heard that. It's not official, but it's in the works. And one of the things I thought too was that with McDaniels staying on, I think that this is going to affect New England's draft strategy for not just the draft, when maybe next year if Bill Belichick's not there. I think it's going to affect their draft strategy this year. New England could be a sleeper team that could draft a quarterback in this year's draft.
They're gonna. That's my thought. They're gonna have to, because I'm of the opinion that Bill Belichick was pissed about trading Jimmy Garoppolo. That it was not his decision at all, and that he knew Tom Brady's time was coming to an end. Or what if Tom Brady gets hurt? He's 40 years old, and the line is not protecting. And you saw what Jimmy Garoppolo did in San Francisco. He took a 1-win team and won 6, 7 in a row.
All he did was win when he got to the 49ers. And you want to talk about a team that doesn't have a lot of talent. He made the most of what was around him. Marquise Goodwin was a fantasy top 20 receiver, I'm pretty sure, with Jimmy Garoppolo throwing to him. So, I am thankful. It is music to my ears, the thought that the New England Patriots, quote-unquote, dynasty is that the window is closing. It's been a long time. I mean, to their credit, they've been winning for 20-some years almost. So, it's got to come to an end at some point.
Yep. What's your theory, Orlando? What's going on in New England?
Well, now all of a sudden, all those reports that were coming out not that long ago kind of starting to make a little bit sense that ESPN is reporting. I don't know exactly what's going on. I know we're going to get into the Malcolm Butler talk going in, but I don't think the whole situation is all fine and dandy in New England as some might think it is. I think there's something going on. Regardless, Brady's already 40, 41. He'll be out not this season, probably by 2019, 2020 season. And I think that's what McDaniels is waiting for. He's waiting for the head coaching job. That's the only thing I could think. And he knows that system well. It's a great group of guys. It's going to be a different team. But ultimately, I think that's what he is. And that's what it has to be, that Belichick's time is coming up. Because it doesn't make that much sense. You think about what the coach – that's not a bad team to go to. You got an up-and-coming running back in Marlon Mack. You got some pretty good receivers there. You got Andrew Luck. And he just gives him the Heisman to stay in New England. So something's going on, but ultimately I think he's gonna wait it out to take that head coaching position from Belichick.
Well, let me point this out and run this past you guys. Looking way ahead, as that he may have made a mistake here. because once Belichick is gone, and let's face it, he's not, as the head coach of the New England Patriots, Josh McDaniels is not going to have Tom Brady because it's not likely to happen this year. So his coaching career is not going to start off with Tom Brady. And think about now the expectations that Patriots fans are going to have after the dynasty that they have had for the past 20 years, the run that they have had the past 20 years. The expectations are going to be through the roof, and he's going to take over a team without the mastermind of Bill Belichick around and without the GOAT Tom Brady around. That's going to be tough, Ryan.
New England fans would be idiots and morons to think that Josh McDaniels is going to continue the greatness of Bill Belichick. I'm not trying to sound like a jerk in saying that, but you had 20 years of being elite. You got, you know what I mean? Like the fact that the Packers went from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers and the Colts went from Peyton Manning to Andrew Luck. Those are not situations that happen to every single franchise. I can talk about the franchise that I've, rooted for that's in my own backyard. We're still trying to find the replacement for Jim Kelly, and he retired in 1997.
The Browns are still trying to find the replacement for Bernie Kosar.
Who's that guy that he's got the sports store and he's got that jersey with all the Browns quarterbacks on it? It's like a dress.
Yeah,
he can wear it like a. I mean, really, they would have to be creative. I think Robert Kraft realizes that the window's closing on Bill Belichick. I don't know how old he is. He's in his late 60s, early 70s maybe. And the fact that he maybe wanted to try to keep that last piece of the Belichick era, and promote him from within. And I don't blame him for thinking that. He's a very smart guy. He's one of the best owners in sports, but you won't have the 6th-round greatest draft steal that there's ever been as your quarterback anymore. And that's just the reality of the situation.
Well, and just the decisions of the moves that they do, bringing in, troubled players in the past, and just knowing which free agents to bring in, which veterans to bring in, and making them click, and which draft moves to make, and just fitting it all together. It's a level of brilliance that's hard to achieve, and you're just not. And you mentioned the level of excellence. Look, they're going to have to settle for a few playoff berths here and there. It's just not. You're not going to contain the level of success that Belichick and Brady's had. So you're right. If he'd have took the Indianapolis job,
be thankful.
Hopefully. If you would have taken the Indianapolis job, hopefully you have a healthy Andrew Luck coming back, and you have at least another 7-8 years of a really good Andrew Luck, I would think, and to build around that. So at least you don't have to worry about your quarterback position, and you can somewhat bring to Indianapolis what you had in New England, because you got an elite premier quarterback. We think Andrew Luck will finally bounce back and be that. But yeah, you may turn around in 4 or 5 years, and Indianapolis is the far more attractive job than New England. So I don't know. We'll see. So one last thing before we get off NFL talk, guys, is I asked Dan, and this is not really my argument. I'm not trying to make this argument because I truly do believe that Tom Brady is the GOAT. I mean, because I've just seen the level of domination of the past 15, 20 years. This is a complete dynasty that we've seen. But I do think Montana was the guy to beat. So the argument is Tom Brady is 5-3 in Super Bowls. He's been to 8. Joe Montana only has one less Super Bowl win, but he's 4-0. He was perfect once he got there. But Dan made the argument that he lost 3 NFC championships, so he had the opportunity to go to more. But I compare this to the Jordan-LeBron debate, because everyone says Jordan is the best, which of course Jordan is the best ever will be. No one ever be. He's the greatest in sports ever, in my opinion. I think a lot of people share that opinion. But he was 6-0. Perfection in the NBA Finals. But LeBron has been to more. He's just lost more. So Jordan is more like the Joe Montana, and Tom Brady's more like the LeBron James to me. Not quite equal, but the same argument is there. So very interesting debate to me that I think that you could have. So I don't know. I don't expect either of you guys to say Joe Montana, but it's worth pointing out that it's an interesting debate. Orlando, who is the GOAT? Who is the greatest of all time?
Yeah, no, I get your whole point, but obviously I'm going to have to say Brady too, and I know that's probably what you're expecting. But besides Super Bowls, you look at the playoff records. I think Brady has more games. I think you look at the trips to the conference title game. I think Brady has more appearances than Montana. I know he has, owns a record for more passing yards in the playoffs and touchdowns as well. And I just look at overall, like, for an example of, like, I know Brady lost this past week to Super Bowl, but that wasn't entirely on him. I know with Joe Montana, once he got there, he was dominant. Just like you said, yeah, he may have lost in some title games, but once he got there, he was dominant. He was 4-0. Brady isn't dominant. He's been 3-0. He's still been dominant, but I don't think you could blame all those losses completely him. And just at looking at overall the records, I think Brady just ended that argument last season after that comeback over the Falcons, even after losing this season to the Falcons.
And I think a lot of people feel that way too. That was
Eagles,
finally when, I think a lot of you said last year. I think that's when a lot of people finally said, okay, well, this dude, this has got to be for sure. This is it, because he just surpassed Joe Montana in Super Bowl wins and the way they did it. And then he went back this year with another MVP, first player ever to win the MVP at 40 years of age. And the other stat, guys, that came up is Tom Brady. Now, this is a negative stat, but still a hell of a stat, that Tom Brady was the first player ever in NFL history in any game, regular season or playoffs or Super Bowl, to lose a game while throwing for over 500 yards, 3 TDs, and no interceptions. First player of that ever to happen to. So that's just crazy. That defense reared its ugly head.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say that too. I mean, people are like, oh, bring that up. He lost a backup quarterback. He costed the ball with 2:23 left to go. The man threw for over 500 yards. The defense wasn't on par. You can't blame that on Brady.
But the two things which I do find ironic that I was talking to you about, Ryan, and the two things that I find ironic about that is, no, you can't blame him because he threw for over 500 yards. But the two critical plays to me is the sack fumble and the pass he didn't catch. It's
the pass that he should have never had to catch. Who in their right mind drew up that game plan to say, hey, on 3rd and 5, we're not even at midfield yet, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe we just passed midfield. Let's throw 41-year-old, 5'7", 140 time, one of the most unathletic players to ever play the game. That also falls to Tom Brady. Why would we throw him the ball like he's Randy Moss?
Trying to out Coach Peterson.
I mean, the regular season,
that was terrible. I mean, if it was the regular season, as Orlando was alluding, I was about to say, I saw that play, and everybody will post the memes and say he should have caught that ball, and he should have done this, he should have done that. They'll make fun of him, but at the same time, would you have thought that there would ever be a moment in the Super Bowl where Tom Brady would have to catch a pass? No. And they were like, well, he would have had to he would have been able to run down the sideline. You really think the speed of Tom Brady would have been seen on that play? Come on. I mean, that's just – it's crazy. In terms of talking about whether he's the best of all time or not, I have a theory in any GOAT discussion where the only outlier to that is Michael Jordan. But in any GOAT discussion, I can't say a guy is a GOAT without really truly seeing his greatest moments or without truly seeing him play year in and year out. And to say Joe Montana is the best of all time, I wasn't around when Joe Montana was doing what he was doing. I've seen Tom Brady's career from day one, and that is the unequivocally best to ever do it. I don't see my eyes seeing anybody better than him in my lifetime, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I was around for, the back end of Montana's career, and I did see him, and growing up, yeah, he was the greatest thing. But I have seen more. I've seen the entire length of Brady's career, and it's what he does at the line. It's the precision of every single play. It's the check downs. It's just the making the right decisions. And
I alluded
it's special.
to the fact that, I alluded to the fact that he's not athletic, but he has found a way to craft his body for exactly what he needs it to do. He's found, and people make fun of, the TB12 method. The guy just won the MVP award. He played in his 8th Super Bowl. And as we mentioned before, he threw for over 500 yards, 3 touchdowns in a game that he lost.
As a 40-year-old.
As a 40-year-old man. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of 40-year-old men out there that wish that they could do half or a quarter of the things that Tom Brady can do on a football field.
Yep. I poke fun because I told you a 39-year-old wouldn't have sacked or wouldn't have fumbled that ball. A 39-year-old would have held on to that ball. But no, it's not on him. It's just kind of ironic that the two, one of the two plays that, were unsuccessful for the Patriots in that game, like two of the only two or three involved Tom Brady specifically. But still amazing numbers. Got to be the GOAT to me. But I still think there is an argument for Montana that a lot of people will make because it's the level of perfection. It's the same thing people say about Jordan. Hey, LeBron has been to 8 straight NBA finals. Jordan only went to 6, won them all. But hey, LeBron has been to more. So I don't know, interesting debate, but we'll close down NFL talk right there for this week. And it's all draft from here on out, guys. So when we pick back up on the podcast 2 weeks from now, it's going to be all NFL draft and getting you ready for that NFL draft and our live NFL draft show. So thanks for sticking around. We're going to talk NBA next. We're going to talk about the Cavs slide and the trade deadline coming up. Some just all around NBA general news coming up next. You are listening to and watching My Fantasy Podcast from myfantasysportstalk.com. I am Brandon Reed. My other co-host, Dan Schalk, had some prior commitments, had to bail out a little early on us. So right now, it's just going to be me, Ryan Thomas, and Orlando Torres. So I tell you what, and I know you're not a big NBA fan, Ryan, but I know you've been keeping up with this cap slide. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. Orlando was all over top of it last night as the Cavs find new and more interesting ways to lose games. What was it, Orlando? They were up by 21 and lost by 18, something roughly like that.
Yeah, no, they got off to a pretty good start. I think they had like 43 points in the first quarter, and LeBron is one of my favorite players, so I do watch a lot of Cavs basketball every when I can. Going back to season, I think he's one of the best players we've had in this generation. And so I'm here watching the game, and they look pretty good. They've been on and off to begin with. They win one, they lose one, and even when they win, it doesn't look pretty good. They were winning barely by 1 to 3 points. And I know you keep up with basketball, Brand. The Magic have not been anything pretty to look at either. I mean, they got some pretty good players, but overall, they're a team with still a lot to prove. And to see the Cavs going there up, score 43 points in the first quarter, up by 21, and to just completely break down and lose by 18 was just ridiculous. I was all over last night, but I just meltdown like that in the regular season, and I know it's just a regular season, but you look at teams to the Magic, and just like what you said, I don't even know they're going to get it past round 1.
No, and the Magic are the second or third worst team in the NBA. They're 17 and 36. So a team like Cleveland should not be losing to a team like the Cavs. And it's not even that the Cavs blew that game and have been blowing leads and been getting blown out and play no defense anymore. It's their spirit is crushed. Isaiah Thomas is not what they thought he was going to be. He's made comments recently as if when controversy and struggles hit, they just go their separate way. Tyronn Lue is not the answer for that team. Never was. He was put in place. He's LeBron's puppet because LeBron could control him. That's exactly what LeBron wanted, so he could run the team the way he wanted to. Now, the front office is not making all the moves LeBron wants, and it's just not going to work out. Then there was that report I shared with you today, Orlando, about LeBron apparently getting in a heated conversation and cursing at Cavs executives, which probably happened last year too because when they weren't making the moves for the trade deadline. But now we're almost here, and they're not making moves. Like I said, it's not even the way they're losing as much as they're losing. It is just this team doesn't have it, and their spirit is crushed.
Yeah, no, the spirit is crushed. I mean, it's pretty much it. LeBron knows it. I think everybody knows it. We've seen it before. But he did say he will not waive his no trade clause, so he will remain as a Cav for the rest of the season. But this is it. You really see it. I mean, and to be fair, LeBron's older. You cannot count on guys like Isaiah Thomas, J.R. Smith, Shumpert, Kevin Love is out. Channing Frye to help go in there and to help LeBron compete against guys like the Warriors, the Celtics, the Raptors, the Spurs, a lot of teams like that, the Clippers.
Darren Williams. Did you even remember that Darren Williams was even on the team?
Oh God, I kept thinking he was still in Brooklyn. That's how crazy.
See, that's what they're made up. They're made up of guys exactly like that. I mean, Derrick Rose, Dwayne Wade, Jeff Green.
Yeah, and his age, LeBron, I mean, he still had a pretty good stat line. He had 25 points. I mean, that's good enough by LeBron to win a game, but you can't expect this guy to keep putting up 30 plus to 40 points a game to save the Cavs' lives. And you could just see it. He's just about done.
Yep, spirit is crushed, in my opinion. So trade deadline's coming up. We saw the Blake Griffin move, talked about that a little bit last week. One move that was made over the weekend, I believe, maybe Friday night, is I want to get your opinion on this real quick, Orlando. The Greg Monroe deal, because I believe that was a very underrated, under-the-radar move that has really made Boston a lot better. It makes them a really formidable front court when you match up Greg Monroe with Al Horford, who's beasting out already. And Greg Monroe is having kind of a resurgence and doing really well in Phoenix. So to me, Cleveland's not making the moves, and Boston makes this move, which I really think really beefs up their team.
Yeah. No, it was a very good move. It was not so much surprising, but it was a move. I mean, Boston was really beefed up to begin with. You just had a guy like Monroe down under. It just, I think they're the team in the East to beat them. They're going to come out of the East, if you ask me. It's fortunate for the Cavs, and I think this is what's really bugging LeBron is he's seeing all these guys move. I know he was pushing hard for Paul George, Eric Gordon, a lot of those guys, and he's just not getting the guys that he wants to. And you see other teams making moves, like Gregor Monroe. You see Tyreke Evans on the market. I don't know. The Cavs are going to try to make a push for him, and it's very frustrating. But it's still making all these teams around him a little bit stronger, and that's got to be bugging him.
I'm going to talk a little bit about Tyreke Evans in just a second because we got one of our longtime fans of the podcast chiming back in this week, Nick Pertins. We're going to talk about that in Memphis basketball, so we'll talk about that in just a second. And we'll move on. Trade deadline is tomorrow at some point. I don't know, 4 or 5 p.m. anyway, tomorrow, Thursday, February 8th. So we'll know a lot more in the next few days. They're kind of quiet right now. We'll see what happens. So let's bring Ryan Thomas back in here before we move on and start answering these mailbag questions we got, because something I talked briefly about with Dan Schalk a little bit earlier is a story I saw at some point last week is a lot of the baseball agents and sports agents are upset about the stalling period right now going on in Major League Baseball. And I don't keep up with baseball regularly to know whether that was, atypical or what's going on right now at this point. But we are talking about pitchers and catchers reporting, very soon, as Dan said, 6 days. And a lot of the free agents have not been moved. So kind of a slow stalling free agent period. So is this atypical, Ryan, or what's your take on this?
It's partially atypical. I would say, I'm moving my chair here. It's partially atypical, but if I were to blame or point the finger at who I think has the most impact on where players go in terms of baseball, which is a little bit set up differently than the other sports. There's the winter meetings where oftentimes there's more trades in terms of the big moves rather than actual signings. So there's been a lot of players that are still available that are mostly represented by one guy, and that is Scott Boras, who has completely created a true evil empire in terms of how he represents baseball players and what he is able to fetch for his clientele. And the majority of the guys that are in waiting, to go to new teams, guys like JD Martinez, he's still highly sought after, mainly because of the fact that Scott Boras is overestimating his worth. And the sad part is, in baseball, the agent can overestimate a player's worth, and most of the time the player actually gets the money. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We're in a stalemate of just teams knowing who they need. They need that one guy to make their team, a little bit better. And they're represented by Scott Boras.
Yep. And I also read something, though, in the piece that was like some of these MLB teams are not bringing in the money that they typically do, or, revenue is a little bit lower, and they're not willing to come off huge money as typical. I don't know, maybe it's the particular free agent class this year, but a lot of these franchises are just not willing to give up, serious bank, for these guys right now.
It's mainly because of the fact that I think there's another theory to it, too. It's mainly because of the fact that the 2019 MLB draft class, a free agency class, is going to be like if I could compare it to NBA, it'd be like when LeBron and Bosh were free agents and there was the
Right.
decision. We're about to see that in 2019 with guys like Bryce Harper and guys like Manny Machado. Manny Machado got an extra year on his deal. He got an arbitration. He had an arbitration meeting, and the Orioles and Machado said, "Well, we'll agree to this for this, this season, this next season." But the reality is, he's going to get traded, and then there's going to be a cat and mouse game between him and the team that he gets traded to. And God forbid, I hope it's not the Yankees, but it's probably going to be. We'll see. There's about to be a lot of wild stuff happening in baseball between big name players going to different teams.
Well, how about this one? I just saw today that the Yankees acquired Russell Wilson. Yes, that Russell Wilson. Did you see that?
I saw something about that. Yeah, I did.
What is he doing? What is he doing? It's like he's not going to try to be a two-sport athlete. He just wants to keep his pitching arm loose or something. I don't know.
He was in spring training with the Rangers, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was the year after they won the Super Bowl. He actually played in spring. He participated in full spring training, which I thought was pretty wild. But I did.
That's what it looked like today. That the Yankees acquired his rights from the Rangers, and he's going to play in the Grapefruit League. Not with the intention of playing baseball and being a two-sport athlete, just to stay in the game for the love of the game, I guess. So
what would be a real story is if he played in the Arizona Fall League while he was playing for the Seahawks. That would be a story.
Yeah, I don't know what his motivation is, but anyway, that was kind of interesting. But, all right, we'll answer mailbag questions coming up next after all the NBA or NFL talk, NBA talk, and even squeezed in some MLB talk there for you. So it's time to answer mailbag questions. You are listening to, and of course watching, My Fantasy Podcast from MyFantasySportsTalk.com. I am Brandon Reed, joined by Ryan Thomas of Thomas Take, the Thomas Take Podcast, and Orlando Torres from San Ann. So the first question, guys, we're going to jump right into these mailbag questions. This is the first one that comes from Tony Peoples. Where does Nick Foles go after winning the Super Bowl? I personally think it'd be a mistake to let him go if I were the Eagles. Wentz may not be right again after that knee injury. So I kind of agree. It is a great point, Tony, that it just I think that Foles is going to demand at this point after winning the Super Bowl and legitimately winning a Super Bowl as a quarterback, not just kind of filling in, not Trent Dilfering it. He actually won the Super Bowl by hellified quarterback play that I think he's just going to demand a starting role and starter salary at this point. So it's going to be tough for the Eagles to hang on to him. But I agree with your premise is that we do not know if Carson Wentz is going to be back fully healthy. And man, that would be such a huge insurance policy for the Eagles, especially when I think they're coming back fully healthy or fully back intact as far as not losing talent and going to be right back in the thick of the NFC title and the Super Bowl title picture. That'd be huge for them to be able to keep Nick Foles. But I don't know that that's going to happen. So other teams that I was looking at that need quarterbacks here, Bears, Cardinals, Bills, Jets, Browns, Broncos. I know Ryan will have his take on that because he's been lobbying for Nick Foles ever since about 6 o'clock Sunday.
6 o'clock Sunday?
Yeah, or before that.
I've been lobbying for him for 3 years, man. You just joined the club.
Well, you were really lobbying for it Sunday.
Now he proved my point. So now I gotta go out there and say, hey.
Emphatically, but you may have some competition. Let me go to Orlando first. What do you think they should do? What should Foles do? What should the Eagles do?
I think it's in the best interest of both of them if Foles just stays in Philly one more season. And I say this, I mean, ultimately, I think he'll be better off for a team like Ryan's team, like the Bills, or possibly even maybe not the Vikings. Broncos are pretty interesting, and the Jets. But if Carson Wentz, his knee isn't right, and say Foles had to start the season probably 4 or 5 games, more so. Let's just say that. You look back at Ryan Tannehill. He hurt his knee late in the season. He couldn't go this season. That's when they brought in Jay Cutler. So say it's a similar situation to Carson Wentz. If you're Nick Foles, you want to get the most money that you can make. Even if he starts out the season as backup, if he stays in Philly, another team's still going to pay him going into the 2019 season because he's still going to be MVP, Super Bowl winning quarterback. But if I'm Nick Foles, and Carson Wentz is going to be the starter whenever he's ready next season, and you get to start the season 3-4 games, whatever it is. You want to start out the season and go and put up war tape at the Super Bowl. If you can be consistent, winning, showing the chemistry with the team, so Nick Foles can say, "Hey, I wasn't just some underdog who had some lucky run that happened to win a Super Bowl and couldn't do it again." You want to go in there and be like, I won the Super Bowl. I was MVP. I went in there. I beat Tom Brady. Started the 2018 season, and I have 4 or 5 games under my belt to show you how consistent I am. To show you that the Super Bowl run wasn't a fluke or some underdog story. And that's just my take on that. That's what I would see. Ultimately, I don't know what's going to happen because Nick Foles probably is not going to want to sit behind Carson Wentz after what he just did. But I think that will be the best for both Philadelphia and Nick Foles. And before I get to Ryan, you just think back of the 2017 season to begin with. It was the year of the backup quarterback. Look at Minnesota. You look at all these other teams that had just had their backups come in and just kill it. And you look at Philadelphia.
You really can throw Kansas City into that mix because they made the choice to go to their backup quarterback officially in the offseason.
Yeah. And you look at teams who didn't have a backup quarterback. Imagine the Patriots after they traded Garoppolo. Brady was down. They're not even in the Super Bowl. They're not beating the Jags. So I think that's pretty. Philadelphia's gonna have to look at that and say like, hey, we need to keep this backup here because for some reason Carson Wentz gets hurt again, or he's not feeling pretty good about that knee, and you don't got Nick Foles. I mean, who do you got? All of a sudden, you're not Super Bowl favorites. You're probably not even favorites to come out of the NFC East. So that's just my opinion. I would like Foles to stay at least another season, but I mean, who knows?
All right, I think I know what Ryan's going to say, but let the campaigning begin.
Okay, so as I alluded to earlier in the podcast, the Buffalo Bills are still trying to replace Jim Kelly, who was elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2002. Okay, so it's been a long time. It's been a long time since they had a quarterback. Okay, this is my plea to the Buffalo Bills, my plea to Brandon Beane, my plea to the Bills Mafia that think that trading the first 2 choices, the multiple first-round draft choices up, trading up, using those picks as ammunition to acquire a rookie. The last thing that the Buffalo Bills need right now, coming off a playoff season, is a rookie that's only going to provide them with a 2 steps forward, 1 step back season. Because Dan has said it, and I've said it a bunch of times. I really think that most of these rookies, outside of Josh Allen, and I do like Darnold and Mayfield a little bit, but outside of those 3, I think that there is some real disappointment mixed in with some of the other names. Nick Foles showed up not just on Super Bowl Sunday, but throughout the 2017 season after Wentz's injury. He showed up against the Falcons. He showed up against the Vikings. And he showed up against the guy that we have all said is the best quarterback of all time. He didn't have as good of numbers in the Super Bowl as him, but regardless, he did what he needed to do.
Hell of a resume,
Yeah, the day and age of saying that Nick Foles is a backup is dead and gone. The guy is a true starting quarterback. He should be the most highly sought-after quarterback in the quote-unquote market, more than Kirk Cousins and more than Alex Smith. So the question is, what would the Buffalo Bills have to trade to acquire Nick Foles? And that's the other side of the coin. I think that Nick Foles would definitely warrant multiple draft picks going to Philly. And mentally, you got to think of it mentally for the AFC East. Buffalo playing the New England Patriots twice a year, it would be a true power move for Buffalo to go out and get Nick Foles. That way, the Patriots would say, we got to go up against this guy twice a season now? Oh, man.
That would be interesting.
Almost feel sorry for the Patriots. Almost. Not quite.
That would be interesting. So, a lot of different opinions there. We'll see what happens. Very interesting, though. There you go. And, Bills got to be right up there with some teams. But there's another team right there in New York that needs a quarterback pretty bad, too. There are the Jets. And our next mailbag question comes from Thomas Samuel Ball. What veteran quarterback will the Jets go for? Kirk Cousins, Nick Foles, or Case Keenum? So I directly went to my man, DDT, the big Jets fan, and I got his take on this. So this is per DDT. they won't trade picks for Foles unless it's a third round this year and one pick from next year plus picks from the other, the team and or players. So Foles is too expensive for what the Eagles will want. So DDT says no to him. Cousins will be overpaid like crazy because he'll demand it, and he's likely to get it. But if the Jets don't want to break the bank and bring in a guy who could be a starter and draft a quarterback later in the draft, then their best shot is Case Keenum. So he's saying bring in Case Keenum as a proven guy who's not going to break your bank, and then go ahead and draft a guy you may feel comfortable with. So you're trying to cover your bases either way, but you're letting Case Keenum probably be the starter. And I kind of agree with that. Kirk Cousins is going to demand bank. I saw the Redskins are even thinking about tagging him again for whatever reason. I don't know why they would do that, but by tagging him again, if they tagged him again, he's going to be making over $30 million. He's been making crazy bank by getting tagged, probably more money than Kirk Cousins is worth. And we just talked about what Nick Foles is most likely going to be worth. And DDT says the Jets are not going to come off those picks like that to probably get either one of those guys. So I don't know. That's one take. Orlando, what do you think about the Jets? What should the Jets do, saying that they're going to go after a veteran like that?
I mean that makes sense. But then again, if you think about the Jets, if they bring in a guy like Case Keenum, I just don't know if it's going to work out the way they hope it does. You look at Minnesota, I just think they were a little bit more polished when they're wide receivers, and especially with the tight end position, and even the running game. I know Dalvin Cook went down, but he still had two pretty good running backs to work with. So it was just an overall team. Case Keenum was my MVP, obviously, and he was a pretty good quarterback for Minnesota. But I just think it's a product of Case Keenum knowing that system. Then you go in a team to like the Jets. I just don't know if it's going to work out right away. I think that might be some bad news. I'm sorry to say that to Dylan, but I think they're better off going after a guy like Kirk Cousins, paying that money for a quarterback that they need.
Ryan, what do you think about your counterparts there in New York and the Jets, and what should they do, assuming they're going to go after a veteran and not just rely strictly on the draft?
I truly think that the Jets are going to draft Baker Mayfield. I've said that for a while. I just think that it's too good of a fit, just based on the fact that the Jets haven't had a draw on their team in a while. They haven't had that guy that they can market and be like, this is our guy. This is the guy that we're going to make the face of our franchise. Whether or not that's a good draft pick or not is another story. I think he's got some intangibles to be a decent quarterback, but he's also got some intangibles to be,
Johnny Manziel
out of the league in 5 years. Yeah. So, in terms of what they should do, I honestly might not be in the popular opinion with this one, but I didn't think Josh McCown was that bad this year. He exceeded all of my expectations. I know they didn't go to the playoffs or anything like that, but for a guy that's in his late 30s, early 40s, I think he's still got a little bit left.
Mm-hmm. They won about 5 more games than everyone thought they would. So
yeah.
Well,
that's fair. I mean, what more could you ask for? And I think that he's got a little bit left. I really do.
That's a different, interesting spin to it. But thanks for the question, Thomas Samuel Ball. We'll see what happens with the Jets. So last one we promised you guys as far as the NFL here. This one comes from Rob Gronkowski's best friend. And I'm going to put it on there, Rob Gronkowski. You're not his best friend if you don't even know how to spell his last name. Let me throw that out there. Horrible job here. So I'm thinking you don't know Rob Gronkowski at all. So I'm putting it on the screen as you spelled it. But anyway, thoughts on Malcolm Butler being benched. Pats would have won if he played. Eric Rowe was terrible against the Eagles wide receivers. Yep, I got to believe that too. RG's best friend. Let's see. They gave up 41 points to the Eagles and decided to bench the player who played the most defensive snaps in the regular season for them. And he's already won you a Super Bowl. He was a very vital part of a piece and made a play to already win you one Super Bowl. I got to believe that. I really do. I got to believe that. Would have helped. It couldn't have hurt. And the excuse that I heard of if this really happened about missing curfew and getting caught with weed is I'm not condoning that. And I would have said he had more common sense right before Super Bowl. But as a coach, am I going to bench him in the Super Bowl for that? No. No, I'm not. I'm gonna play him. So I don't know if there was something more to that or not, but I gotta believe that. Orlando, what do you think? Would they have won if they played Malcolm Butler?
Yeah, they would have. I think they would have made a couple more stops because there was hardly any punts. And I think that ultimately that's what the game came down to. Who's going to get that first stop? Who's going to get that turnover? And it worked on Philadelphia's side. He needed a guy like Malcolm Butler on the defensive end to help out the Patriots. So I totally believe that statement as well.
Ryan?
The tough part is with decisions like these is we can, but technically we can't. We don't know whether they would have won or not because they didn't play. So we just got to go by, do we think their chances would have been better to win? Yeah, I think their chances would have been better to win. And I think that these reports of him, curfew and marijuana and things like that, I honestly think it's all just a bunch of hoopla because you go back to the start of this season and even the offseason, if I'm not mistaken, there were rumblings that he was going to be a part of the trade for Brandon Cooks with the Saints, and it never material. The Patriots got Cooks, but they never had to send the Butler back to the Saints. So I think that there's just friction between Butler and the Patriots that is gonna end, pretty soon with him leaving the team. I don't see him staying in New England much longer at all, and I don't blame him. I would his statement. I read it yesterday. Yeah, his statement. I read it yesterday on Instagram. Very professional. He seems like he's a good guy. I think that, and not only that, Tom Brady liked it and commented on it and said, "You're a great teammate, great guy, great father," and was just giving him all these great compliments. And he's one of the leaders of the team. I mean, there was no reason for him to be benched. They're just. I don't care what we find out. It was a stupid decision.
He played most snaps of any defensive player on the team, and dude is just a playmaker. Some guys are just playmakers. All it takes is one play, and he was that dude. So, I do believe there's a very high probability that the outcome would have been different if he played the most snaps of the defense again in the Super Bowl like he had all year. I have to believe that. So, thanks, RG's best friend. One more question here. This comes from our friends Nick and Judy Pertins chiming in. This is from Nick. Hey, MFST peeps. Sorry we were absent last week, but appreciate the shout out as always. Brandon, you know what's coming. Tyreek Evans, WTF are we doing? I mean, really, I just don't know anymore. Management is ruining what we built for a decade. I don't understand a rebuild. I mean, I understand a rebuild, but why not keep the actual talent you have and accrue more? Give me the new breed hot take. 100%. Tyreek is the best thing we go. And Tyreek, I've said this on the podcast for months and months and months. He is what we've been missing as a Grizzlies franchise for years since Rudy Gay. We need that scorer. We need that slasher. We need that guy who just gets buckets. That's what we've been missing. I don't know what's going on. They set him to trade him. It hasn't really materialized as of right now. So teams that are Boston is up there, Denver and Philadelphia are some of the hot teams that are really interested. Miami is in the mix too. I saw even Cleveland may want to get in the mix, but they were offering a first-round pick. It depends on what first-round pick. I don't really want Cleveland's first-round pick. I'd much rather have maybe Denver's. I don't know. Not sure what kind of package Boston's going to put together, but I really haven't heard any movement today. Trade deadline is tomorrow, so we'll see, but completely agree, Nick. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why you want to move Tyreek. They paid a sack of nickels for him, and I want to keep him, man. I want to bring Mike Conley back. I want to bring Marc Gasol back at this point. Could see more trading Marc Gasol than Tyreek Evans at this point, but you're going to suck. You're going to get a fairly high draft pick, probably lottery pick. So keep your Tyreek Evans. Mike Conley comes back healthy. Maybe Chandler Parsons even comes back healthy. And with Marc Gasol, plus you add a pick and you try it again next year, keep trying to build this thing. But no one's beating the Warriors the next 2-3 years. So, whatever you decide to do, we'll see. But I don't agree with moving Tyreek. I'm with you, Nick Pertins. All right. Last question, guys. This, Ryan, I don't know if you've been on since we started doing this, but this is kind of a new segment. The folks have been throwing us food questions, so we call it the foodie question of the week. But this week, we're going to change it up. It's going to be the drinky question of the week. So this one comes from Deshaun Graham. What is your drink of choice? Beer? If so, what kind? Liquor? Wine? Or the bitch's choice wine coolers? My favorite is Johnny Walker. sip that shiz
So
on the
much hate.
So I'll open it up to you guys. We'll start with Orlando. I saw you talking about import beers just the other day, like last night. So I know you got a hot take on this.
Yeah, it's not so much import beer. I'm more of a craft beer guy. I like going to local breweries, so local stuff, or I like going to a kind of like a beer house where I like to try beers from all over the country and all over the state. Instead of pouring my money into those big corporations like Anheuser, nothing against those companies. Those are some pretty good beers, but I just like to go out there and see, what other countries or what other breweries are making. I like a lot of porters, coffee beer like that, or something a little bit light sometimes, and seasonal beers. And I like a lot of Shiner. I mentioned Shiner on here too because they make a lot of seasonal beers. And Shiner, they're based out of Shiner, Texas, and that's less than 2 hours from where I'm at. So there'll be times in the summer where I'll make a drive up there to Shiner, Texas, and you could actually drink Shiner fresh as they're making it. You could drink it fresh, so it's warm. But right away, as soon as you taste it, right away, quickly gives you a buzz because it's still fresh. But they got beers that they're not selling in the store, but you could have a request and they give it to you. And I like going to Austin a lot too because they got some nice little breweries and some nice avocado burgers and stuff like that to try along. So yeah, and you ask me, I'm more of a beer guy, craft beer guy to be exact.
All right, Ryan, what would be your drink of preference if you just gonna get crazy with it?
Orlando's take on that got me like maybe thinking about going to the bar after this. Maybe, I do have to work tomorrow morning, so maybe not. But no, anyways, I have actually really tried hard to drink craft beer. I've tried to, dabble in a little bit of this, dabble in a little bit of that. And I like certain craft beers, more pale ales and things like that. But I'm more of a domestic beer drinker. I like the corporation beer, as Orlando put it. I don't know. I'm not a big. I don't drink wine. I'm more of a Labatt Blue drinker. The Labatt Blue is huge in Buffalo. There's actually a couple factories, in Western New York, and I've always liked Labatt Blue. That's always been my thing. Labatt Blue, Heineken. I'd say Sam Adams, Oktoberfest in the fall. The more domestic beers are my beers of choice, but all of them are good. They're all pretty good.
All right. Well, there's your hot take drinky questions from Orlando and Ryan Thomas. I'm just going to keep it real simple. I used to be kind of a beer connoisseur, trying everything and trying to, drink different imports and your mix and matches and stuff. But I had to stop drinking beer because the fattening of the beer. I dropped so many pounds, dropped 10 pounds after I stopped drinking beer and kept it off. For that reason, I kind of stopped drinking beer. So more of a liquor guy myself. My go-to is going to be Evan Williams. Keep it real simple. Evan Williams, 1783. If I had to really splurge, then there's a Wild Turkey breed of bourbon, a Wild Turkey spinoff, but it's the higher brand. It's the top shelf version of Wild Turkey, and it's called Rare Breed. Might want to check that out if you're ever somewhere. Very smooth. Love that. So real quick and simple liquor for me going forward. So I like the Johnny Walker too, man. Can't argue with sipping that shiz on the Izzy, Deshaun Graham. Thanks for throwing a different twist in there. We appreciate it. But that's it for this episode of My Fantasy Podcast. We got to get out of here. Don't forget, folks, 2-week break. We're not going to be back for 2 weeks. Going to take off next week. We'll be back in full force. So keep submitting all the questions. Keep watching and listening on every avenue that you can. Don't forget the new ones with Stitcher and Spoke. Check us out on WBLZsports.com, YouTube, Facebook, iTunes, SoundCloud, and, of course, on the website, myfantasysportstalk.com. Thanks to Orlando Torres for dropping in, Ryan Thomas of the Thomas Take Podcast, and Dan Shaw for sneaking in here and talking with us. We'll see you in 2 weeks back here for another episode of My Fantasy Podcast. Later, podcast peeps. Peace.